Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Dan Duckworth. He is the founder of The Crucible Life, which is an online leadership community of changemakers to facilitate his mission to make deep change accessible to the masses, not just to the executives. He's led complex executive level transformational initiatives as well as peons. Okay, that includes probably most people, CEOs, consultants, and as a coach and teacher, he's done a tremendous amount. His current mission is to find, liberate, unite, inspire, unleash the change makers across every industry and sector, regardless of job function or authority. So, Dan, that is rather remarkable what it is that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about what is a change maker and what is it you're really trying to achieve?
Oh, thanks, Lois. I'm glad to be here with you. I love talking about this because, as you mentioned, I've got a personal life mission right now to find the change makers and to gather them and to unite them into a single community that we believe will be incredibly powerful, not just for the individuals who join this community, but for the community itself. We'll be able to do powerful things. So your first question is the right question. What is a change maker? And fundamentally, it's somebody who makes change. But as an identity, it's really somebody who feels deep down inside like they have a mission or a purpose to lead change for the people they love and the communities they care about. And these could be people who have identified as leaders and change makers from the very beginning of their lives as young people or as young adults, or they're people who are coming into it late into the stages of their life where suddenly they realize something needs to change in the world or in my part of the world. And not only that, I think I'm supposed to be the one who leads the change. And so we get all kinds of people who, some of them are ready and they've got leadership chops and they've got leadership experience. And others come to us and say, I'm kind of getting into this for the first time. I realize I've been a boss, I've been a manager, I've been a parent, I've been a teacher, whatever it is. But now I think I'm supposed to be a change maker.
Okay. So before we go further, I need to know a little bit, and I think our audience needs to know a little bit about what your background is and what brought you to having this passion.
Yeah. So like you read in the bio, I started out as a peon and somehow I ended up leading executive level transformational initiatives where I was basically partnering with the executives in the company, coaching them either behind the scenes or by their side to do big, strategic, important changes for the organizations that we worked for.
Okay, so what does that mean? What's a big strategic change? Because I think everybody defines that so differently. So what does that mean?
Well, every organization gets locked into patterns, into we can call them habits. They get locked into a culture. And when that culture serves your mission's goals, well, that's great. Culture is a fantastic thing. But when that culture becomes counterproductive, it becomes obstructive to the actual goals of the organization. Now you've got new leaders, new executives who stand up and they say, we're going to do XYZ for the good of the company. And then nothing happens because the culture is locking us in place. And those executives who might have been great managers or great finance, minds or brains or whatever it was, suddenly they find that they can't do what they want to do. They can't do what needs to be done for the organization and for the constituents or the customers that the organization serves. And so that's when you need a transformational initiative. You need to lead some kind of strategic objective, whether it's a new product, whether it's a new market change, whether it's an HR restructuring. But those things are fundamentally have to be transformational because they are up against the culture. And so what I found when I was a young person in organizations was that these executives had no idea how to lead through culture change. And it's not just changing culture. That might be one of the goals, but it's leading through culture to accomplish whatever needs to be done for the sake of the organization. And so my trajectory was after a decade of finding myself, as the lowest person in the organization, suddenly helping executives lead these initiatives because I seemed to be able to see things and understand things and lead things with respect to culture. Then I got asked by a leadership consultant to come outside, as we would call it, to come on the outside and to teach other people how to do that. And so that started what's been now a 6 or 7 year journey of learning how to empower other people to become change makers.
Got it. Okay, so let's go back to what it is that you're creating in terms of change makers. You're trying to create a community of change makers, but why a community? What does a community of change makers do?
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. So you have to go back to the very most basic question about what do you believe about leadership and how does leadership change? Because if you believe leadership reflects knowledge, then you need to transfer knowledge to people. If you believe leadership reflects skills, then you need to help them practice and give them formulas and steps. But if you believe leadership reflects character, then the way you go about leadership development is totally out of step or out of alignment with the traditional approaches to leadership development. We believe fundamentally, and we believe the research also backs this up, that leadership performance reflects character. Therefore, if you want to transform your leadership performance, you have to transform your character. That is not easily done. Just like culture is not easily transformed, character is not easily transformed, but it's possible. And so we've developed some processes and approaches over the last couple of years that have unlocked a few keys, a few secrets, if you will. One of our secrets, Lois, is community. We have found that when the natural process is when the right people engage in the right conversation, in the right mindset, they begin a transformational journey and they sustain a transformational journey. So our job, my job is I thought it was to stand up and teach people about leadership. I thought I was supposed to be a smart guy and get up and be a guru. And what I've learned over the last 6 or 7 years of doing this is my job is actually to just gather the right people, put them in the right mindset and frame up the right conversation, and then step back and watch the magic happen as their journeys take off.
So character is being defined. Who defines character? Because we have a lot of people right now. You have social media, you have politicians, you have many different groups trying to define what is the correct character. So when you start talking about that, what are you really meaning and what are you implying by that?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked that because to us, character has a very specific meaning. And yes, it can be defined differently, but when you come and you interact with us, character is your default mental model. It's your default behavioral patterns. It's what you do when you get in a situation and you don't have the time or the luxury to think about it. That reveals your character, which is a reflection of your life experiences and how you've interpreted those life experiences. So we do not talk about character as if it is good or bad. We talk about character as if it's helping you reach your objectives or it's not helping you reach your objectives. Okay. So it's not really a moral judgment. It's really more of a strategic judgment. And what you look at is, are you getting the results you want? Okay. We have leaders come to us every day and they say, I used to be a great leader. I used to get great results, but I'm stuck. And the things that I was doing before aren't working now. Well, that's a reflection that your character is locked in and you need to go through a character change. You need to become fundamentally a new person so that you can behave differently in these new situations and get different leadership results.
So how is that different from a mindset perspective or belief perspective?
Yeah, so it's probably more akin to beliefs and assumptions than it is to mindset. But mindset is a critical part of character change. You have to get into a growth mindset in order to change your character. And character really does reflect your beliefs about yourself, about others, and about the situation that you're in. And so the key here is, how is character transformed? Dr. Avolio at the University of Washington, he says it best. Character is fundamentally transformed through crisis. We get locked into beliefs, we get locked into behaviors, and it's really a crisis that shows us that we're in a failure state. And then we are forced to experiment with new behavior. We spend our whole lives resisting doing things in a new way, in a risky way, because we can't take the chance. When crisis hits, you have nothing to lose, so you start to experiment. So Lois, the question that we started to ask ourselves as we understood the research and as we understood our own experiences, was how do you entice people to self-initiate crisis-like situations in their lives when their default, when their DNA says, I'm supposed to work to avoid a crisis, but actually, if you want character change, you have to walk into the crisis.
Okay. So by implication, that also means the organization as a whole needs to be in a similar state to be motivated to move. Am I correct?
That's very perceptive, very intuitive. Yes. You can't really lead deep change for an organization unless you as a leader are experiencing deep change as an individual, and vice versa. You can't really experience individual deep change unless you're leading your organization into the same kind of experiences, because your character is situationally defined. It's situationally relevant. And so if the situation doesn't call for character change, doesn't give you opportunities to grow and to develop, you can't do it. So part of leading your own personal journey is figuring out how to transform the community that's around you, your team, your department, your family, your church, your school, whatever it is.
Okay, so you're creating a community to do this. Community creates that incubator, so to speak, where character can redefine itself, right?
Yeah. If you think about self-determination theory, they say there's 3 conditions, psychological conditions, that have to be met in order for somebody to do something hard, to choose to go into the crisis, to choose to go into the refiner's fire. And those three psychological conditions are: number 1, you have to feel like you're making your own choices and you're not being forced into it. Number 2, you have to feel like you can be successful, that even though you're going to go through something hard, that you actually could achieve the goal and make it through. Number 3 is you have to feel like you're surrounded by people who support you. Okay, so that's where the community really comes into play, is when you're alone inside an organization trying to lead deep change. I've been there. That is an incredibly lonely and difficult place, because the culture by definition resists deviance. And so when you deviate from the norms, the culture and the people who represent the culture, they push back on you. They will, when you really get outside the lines, they will try to squash you. And that's a very difficult, traumatizing place to be. And so if you can belong to a community of people who are like-minded, who are change makers in their own worlds, in their own organizations, now you have that validation. You have that place to go to recover, to get ideas, to build your courage, and to go back into your organization and keep fighting the good fight.
So what you've got, it's like a support group for change makers. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like a support group that is specifically designed to ramp up your passion, your energy, your engagement, and really to spur within you the ideas to go lead change. Because that's the interesting thing, Lois. When I first got into teaching leadership, I would teach content. I would teach principles, frameworks, theories, you name it, from academics, mostly from the University of Michigan, because that's where we got our start. And as I taught the content, I noticed that people were always very interested. But when I slipped into teaching from my experiences, the people were moved. And so I started to really analyze what's going on there. And the people would come up to me and they would say, "How did you do that?"
Right.
And I would say, "What are you talking about?" They say, "Well, where did you get the ideas?" I'd say, "Well, they just came from inside of me." "Well, where did you get the courage to act on those ideas?" "That just came from within me." So the question became, how do we help people discover their own ideas and develop their own courage? We cannot give you the solutions. And that's the problem that we have in the leadership development industry, is so many of us are so bent on giving the answers, on being the smart person in the room, on letting everybody know that we've done it before. And if you just copy us, your life will be great. And it doesn't work that way. Every great leader, every change maker that we celebrate, whether they are famous or whether they are just a local person that we know, the ideas always came from inside of them. And the courage was always theirs to act. And so we have taken a very different approach, which is, how do we create those unique psychological conditions that invite people to take their own journeys into leading deep change.
Okay, so let me understand something.
Yeah.
You're taking people who are incredibly busy, who are in a lot of pain, who are overwhelmed, stressed, a board of directors breathing down their neck, and an organization that is not receptive, and you want them to now join a community. Is that correct?
What we don't want them to do is go binge on a bunch of podcasts and go binge on a bunch of self-help books. What we don't want them to do is go back and get an MBA because they think that's going to solve all of their problems. We don't want them to go sign up for a course that's going to require them to sit in a classroom type setting, even if it's over Zoom, for 5 hours a week for the next 30 weeks or even the next 2 weeks. We don't want them to go spend $15,000 to go spend a week at Harvard University Executive Education for leadership, because those things are all focused on knowledge transfer and skill development. Instead, they have the opportunity to simply find their people and to engage. And this is what we're experimenting right now, Lois, with the Crucible Life. It's all a virtual-based community. So we've done this with in-person communities, and it's electric. When these people get together and they have the right conversation and the right mindset, it explodes. And so now we've said, how do we make this accessible to the masses? Right? We can do this for the Fortune 500 companies like we have. And then you have to be lucky. You have to be in that company. They have a huge HR development budget. They have a focus on leadership development. And out of 3,000 managers, they chose you to be one of 30 people to participate. See, I had that experience. And then I started talking to other people who I knew and loved, and they needed this opportunity. They were change makers at heart, but they were stuck. And I was saying, I know how to help these people, but they will never have this opportunity because they don't work for the right company and they're not lucky. So then the question for me became, how do I take these secrets, so to speak? How do we make these accessible to whoever wants it? Now I start using the language of the masses and people say, oh, so you're doing this for everybody in the world. I said, no, we're doing this for everyday leaders, for change makers, for people who feel called inside. They feel something saying to them, you're supposed to do more. You're supposed to be more because the people you love and the communities you care about are desperate for you to do more and to be more. And if not you, then who? And so we want to find those people and say, yeah, you may be an executive, but you may not be. You may work in for-profit, but you may not. You might work in business. You might work in education. You might be a pastor of a church. But we want to give you the opportunity to really develop and explore your own potential by going on your own journey. Now, if you look, Lois, at what's called the hero's journey in literature, I love that archetype because it's such a great parallel for the way leadership actually develops in the real world. You go through the hero's journey, but on every hero's journey, there are friends and mentors. You can't make it alone. It's your journey. You have to do the work. You have to lead the change, but you can't do it alone. There's always friends and mentors. And so that's what we're building through the Crucible Life, is a community of change makers who support each other. And yes, we have the gurus. Yes, we have the coaches. So we have the friends and the mentors. And as you get connected into that, it's amazing to watch what happens to these people. I mean, they literally will get on a call and they'll say, I have no idea what just happened, but I was listening to so-and-so talk about her story and about her journey, and something just changed inside of me. And then I went and I did XYZ in my own organization. I never imagined doing that before. And now all of a sudden they're on the journey.
So in order for this to work and for people to arrive at the point where they're part of your community, there's already an awareness, right? That there's something more that's driving them. And they also are accountable to an organization that may not be ready. So how do you help them deal with that?
Well, it's a great point. So there's actually different stages for every change maker. And we have people come to us who say, I'm not sure I'm a change maker, but there's a seed that's been planted in their heart. There's something going on there. So they actually need to go on a journey to discover their identity as a change maker. And then we talk a lot about trophy goals. Those are the big, wild dreams that you're after that really motivates you to go into and through the refiner's fire. Well, a lot of people say, well, I don't know what my trophy goal is. I don't have it. Well, guess what? You get to go on a journey because it's in there and it's part of you unlearning a lot of your own inhibitions, a lot of your own assumptions. It's a part of you defining your values. And we don't do a lot like traditionally you would see in leadership development. We don't like sit down and like write out your values or take a test to understand your values. You just get into your situation and you start leading and you start making change and you learn through your own epiphanies what it is you value, right? So I was just on one of our calls in the class last week, and we do a segment called Your Story. So I was helping a woman named Carrie kind of break down her story. Where are you at right now in the hero's journey? And let's just talk about it and see if we can help you generate epiphanies, because that's all we really do. Generate epiphanies, and then you go act on them. So I said to her, I said, you know what your trophy goal is? And she said, no, this is really frustrating me. I want to know, right? But she has so much energy to lead change. So I just asked her a few different questions. And all of a sudden she started talking about this problem in the world. She started talking about how she feels like there are so many women in the world who are ready to have a voice, who are ready to lead change, but it just seems so inaccessible to them. And they lack the character or the vision to see themselves really rising up as a change maker. And she said, I just have this vision of helping thousands and thousands of women to find their voices as change makers. And I stopped her and I said, that sounds an awful lot like a trophy goal, right? So she had that inside of her and she's on the journey to discover that. Then the next stage is going on the journey to figure out how do I have to change myself in order to become the kind of person who can lead that kind of change? Because that right now, helping thousands and thousands of women find their voice, that's beyond her capability. She's not currently able to do that, but she is able to become that. So that's her next stage of her journey. And it just goes on and on and on. That's why we call it, Lois, the crucible life, because this isn't a one-time experience. When you join the crucible life as an identity, what you're saying is, I'm going to grow and go through journey after journey after journey for the rest of my life, because I'm going to change the world for as long as I live.
Got it. So what's interesting about what you're saying is some time ago, I did a podcast with a gentleman out of London who does executive coaching with major leaders in the UK, also Europe, particularly with the oil industry. And his comment was, if people are unhappy with the workplace we've created, have we defined leadership incorrectly? And I think part of what he was getting at is part of what you're saying, and that is we keep trying to create something within a system that we don't really fundamentally change. And so when that happens, we have energy, but we don't really see the results that we're looking to see. Is that sort of in keeping with where you're at?
Yeah, Lois, for me, leadership is only a utility. It's not something that you aspire to in and of itself. It's not a goal in and of itself. It's a utility. It's a means to an end. There is change that needs to be made for the organization, for the market, for the industry, for the sector, for the community. And therefore, we need leadership to help us reach that. And so ironically, what we've discovered is that that's also relevant to how leadership has grown. You don't become a better leader by trying to become a better leader. You become a better leader by hyper-focusing on your problematic situation and saying, what do I need to do differently to get different results here and now? The analogy that I use is, if you're a kayaker, it's not saying, how do I become a better kayaker? It's saying, I'm in the whitewater right now, and I've got to figure out how to get over there from here to there safely, effectively, quickly, whatever the goal is. And I'm going to start to experiment, because what I'm doing right now isn't getting me the results that I want. So I experiment with how I hold the paddle, how I lean, all of those things until I get to the other side. Now, two great things have happened. Number one, the goal of achievement. I got to the other side. I accomplished my goal because I was willing to experiment with new behavior. So that's fantastic. But number two, in the process, I learned so much about myself. about the river, about the laws of physics, about kayaking in general. And now I am a better kayaker. And so it's the same with leadership. Leadership is a utility. So we get in these problematic situations, and we, through the conversations, we help you hyper focus. What is going on right now? What's really happening? Not what you tell yourself is happening, but what's really happening. And how do you begin to experiment with new behaviors until you get the results that you want? In the process, the goal of achievement, you raised profits, revenue, market change, new product, whatever it was, you changed your school, you got student achievement, whatever is your goal, right? You reached your goal. And in the process, you became a better leader. You developed character assets that you now take with you into the next leadership journey.
Got it. So I think it's an incredible challenge. I think there are a lot of people who will love to be a part of this community. So we will have information about Dan and his work in the show notes for you. Dan, our time is almost up. Thoughts that you would like to make sure that the audience gets before we close, or things that we have started to talk about but are incomplete?
Well, I just think it's interesting how there's so much flux and change in the world right now. And if you think about where we've been with COVID and everything through the last year, what I hear repeatedly is people saying, I don't like the status quo. I don't like the way things are. Now, a lot of these people are people who are stuck, not in terrible situations. They're actually stuck in pretty good situations. They've got good jobs, they've got good benefits, they've got stability. And yet there's something inside of them that says, I think I'm supposed to do more. I think I'm supposed to become more, because the people I love and the communities I care about are looking to me. And so that's really, it's a phenomenon that I think is growing in the world. And we're trying to create a home for people like that, a place to come hang out, to find the others who are like you, not because they're the same gender or the same politics or the same nationality or the same race, but because they also have the heart of the changemaker. And so we just encourage anybody who thinks that might be them, or wonders if that's them, they can come check us out at cruciblelife.com. You can also find me at danduckworth.net, is a great place to connect. And if anything, my email address is on there. Shoot me an email and just say, hey, here's what's going on. Help me think through this. Because that's what we do every day, is we try to find, to gather, unify, liberate, and empower the change makers.
So Dan, it has been wonderful to have you on the podcast and to hear about what you're trying to do. I think there are a lot of people who would like to do more. We hear it from the younger generation, particularly. How do I leave a mark? And those of you who are building a legacy, this is an important issue for us to think about. So information about Dan and his work will be in the show notes for you. Dan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Lois, you're doing great work. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast, thank you very much. And be sure to visit our website at buildtomorrow.com and our social media as well. Thank you.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.